Tonight we're going to kind of talk about reproduction and heredity, I should say. Um, so this is kind of your birds and bees kind of talk here. Where do babies come from? Um, so I'm not going to explain the birds and the bees to you, but I'm going to kind of talk about a little bit of the vocabulary that's involved here. One thing is the word chromosomes, and then we have DNA and genes. So a chromosome kind of takes on this view here. You get like 23 chromosomes from the dad, and you get like 3 chromosomes from the mother. So your mom and dad gave you each 23 chromosomes. And these chromosomes are this genetic material called DNA. This DNA has all the important information that makes you who you are. Remember, you're a unique individual. Each person's fingerprint, like when you do a fingerprint, you're the only one who has that fingerprint. You're a unique individual. And that's all part of this DNA process that we have. So remember, nowadays, that's how people identify criminals and things like that, is using DNA. It's such an important, uh, unique part of who we are. Um, so these genes are what passes on our traits to us. So those are some key words there. Chromosomes, they carry the DNA material, and then the DNA is what passes on these traits or your genes. Something to bring to your attention here is what's called the Punnett Square. A Punnett Square kind of describes how these traits happen. So for instance, in these two babies, this first baby has brown eyes. And the second baby has blue eyes. So the question is, why does one baby have brown eyes and one baby have blue eyes? And again, your eyes may be a different eye color, but why is that? Well, in our passing on the genes, there's what's called a dominant gene, and then there's what's referred to as a recessive gene. Dominant is just like it is. It's kind of the one that carries the weight. So if a dominant trait is present, so in other words here, big B, they use this word homozygous. Homo means kind of same. So in eye color, brown is a dominant color. If a genotype here, again, if a person has, again, like I said, you get one trait from your parent, one from your mom, and one from your dad. So, if your dad passed you on a big B and your mom passed you on a big B, well, you'd be considered homozygous dominant. Since there's a dominant trait present, well, you only have one choice. You're going to have brown eyes in that situation. But there's also this other scenario where you're heterozygous. Heterozygous is where it gets kind of interesting, because heterozygous means you're mixed, because hetero kind of means mixed. So heterodominant means you have a brown eye gene present and you have a blue eye gene present. But notice how brown is dominant. Even though you have a blue eye trait, you do not yourself have brown eyes, or you yourself have brown eyes. You do not have blue eyes. But the cool thing is you still have ability to have children with blue eyes, because you do have that trait present in your DNA. Now, to have blue eyes, you actually have to be what we call recessive, homozygous recessive. Recessive means you have what's called not the dominant trait, but the non-dominant trait, or recessive. Homo, again, means same. So there's only one scenario to have blue eyes, is you have to have only the recessive trait. So that means you have to have 2 little b's. If you're 2 little b's, then you do have blue eyes. Okay. So one of the ways they model this on the GD test is what's called the Punnett Square. So, one parent, this may be your dad over here, and this may be your mom over here. And your dad has big B little b, which means your dad has brown eyes. He's got the brown eye trait and he's got the blue eye trait. And mom also has big B, little b. So she also has brown eyes. And these would be both examples of heterozygous. So both these parents would be heterozygous since they're mixed. Now, as far as their offspring goes, when they have a baby, these are their four options that they would have. So dad could pass on big B, mom could pass on big B. So we have a big B baby, which means that is going to be a homozygous dominant baby. In other words, he has brown eyes and or she has brown eyes, and they're only going to be able to pass on brown eyes to the next generation. Now, dad could pass on big B and mom could pass on little b. So, in other words, we have this big B, little b, which means this offspring, this baby, would also have brown eyes. But it has the ability to pass on brown and blue. Dad, on this other scenario, your dad could actually pass on the blue eye trait, the recessive trait, and mom could pass on the brown eye dominant trait, and they could have an offspring that is big B, little b, which again, this is a brown eyed baby. And then the fourth scenario is dad could pass on little b, mom could pass on little b, and they could have a little b, little b. In other words, they could actually have a blue eyed baby. So just because your mom and dad both have brown eyes does not mean you're guaranteed to have a brown eyed baby. You can still have a blue eyed baby. So since this is 1 in 4, that would be a 25% chance of being blue, and then there is a 75% chance, a 3 in 4, or a 75% chance of being a brown eyed baby. So if you know your genetics, you would I'm sorry, that would be a 75% chance of being brown. So if you know a little bit about what your DNA material is, what your traits are, you could have an idea of what traits can be passed on. That's how some people are doing these little DNA tests and stuff to kind of know what they're able to uh, have and pass on to their offspring. So that's part of what we call DNA and genes. And hereditary means what kind of traits you're going to get from your parents and what traits that you are going to be passing down to your children. It's all going to be hereditary. You don't have a whole lot of options here. You're made and you are made in who you are, and you're only going to pass on uh, what you are able to pass on. So uh, those things cannot be changed. You have to accept who you are there. So some key words there again is this homo, which kind of means same. Homozygous dominant means you're a big B, big B. Heterozygous means you're mixed. You have a big B, little b. And then homozygous recessive means you have these little b traits involved here, which means you can actually have the recessive trait. And this goes on for other things besides eyes, hair, um, color, and things like that. And that's not only for humans as well. DNA is also part of every living thing. So when it comes to plants and trees and stuff, they also have this ability to pass on different traits to the next generations of plants and animals, things like that. So that's part of what we refer to then as your hereditary, your heredity. So I'm going to stop there. And again, there's going to be another video that's going to talk more about this if you like to watch.